What helped you get over a crush you had for years? The fact that I just stopped initiating the conversation and that was the last time we talked. Well, for me, I kept telling myself that I did not fall in love with her, but with the idea of her. I had always imagined a future with her. I wouldn't bore you with the details. But yeah, in those imaginations she seemed to be so excited about my presence. I mean, she was in real life too. She is a pretty good friend of mine. But in those dreams, a little more, I guess. But anyway, the fabricated and real girl were almost pole opposites in nature. So I kept telling myself for 3 years that the girl I actually had a crush on never existed. I liked the girl in my imagination. And there, she liked me back too. It wasn't the case with the real one. So that's what helped me move on from her. She's still my friend. Maybe we're not as close as we were before. Maybe it's for the best. I still sometimes get slight feelings for her, but I'm sure it will wear out with time. Our interests were too similar. I liked girls. So did she. My grandma ran into his dad at my open house and I then found out that we are cousins. Getting to know her, lol. He rejected me and I sat up all night crying and eventually realized that the last 4 years I'd had a crush on him. I had pretty much just looked at all the positive interactions and filled in the rest of the time by projecting a personality onto him. Bigger crush. He tried to stab his mom. That was kind of a deal breaker. A lot of time. A lot of crying and a lot of time spent on my own. The realization that I would probably feel lonely in a relationship with him. Found a woman who was interested in me. It's so much better when the feelings are mutual. Her engagement photo. Keep distance and get some hobbies. I asked her out. She said no. Ended up becoming friends. Still don't recall how or when exactly I got over her. I guess hanging out with her over the years made me realize that being friends is better than being together. She's a wonderful friend. Though she still made fun of me for asking her out that time. What? Taking rejection like a grown up and moving on with your life while seeing them? Username checks out. You're doing it wrong. You have to accept it. Don't obsess over them. But don't push the thought of them away so much that you can't process it. Allow yourself to come to terms with it. Accept it for whatever it is. And realize what you need to do to move forward. Everyone is different and every situation is different. But I believe the first step is acknowledgement and acceptance. I've gotten over every sustained crush I've ever had by getting to know the person. He hit on my daughter, saying that he's enjoyed watching her bloom since he met her at 14. It made me vomit. Nothing. Not completely. I still think about her sometimes. 25 years later. Time. She got married and I just thought. Going out with them in the reality versus the dream. She had a shrine to a certain Austrian art school reject. Pretty big deal breaker. I called and told her I had cancer. She replied, so? I think sometime during our teen and early 20s the feelings were mutual. But timing was always off. So, I wrote him a farewell letter. Apologizing for growing apart and told him I'll always love him. Wished him the best and left it at that. I don't know if he ever received the message. But it gave me the necessary closure to move on with my life. And remember us during the happier times we had. Time and her cringy Instagram statuses. Dating her for a while. Seeing them make awful life choices that stress their partner out and realizing if I had made a move years ago I would be the one picking up the pieces. Imagining hypothetical situations for so long that I discovered the situation where we actually go out but then I dump the crush. A new crush. Time. Realizing she had a lack of ambition with her life. And that I was a lot more invested into maintaining the relationship than she was. Something I always try to remember going forward is that you have to separate what the relationship used to be, what it could be, versus what it actually is. Some things you just can't change or work out. I realized I didn't really have a crush on him, but forced myself to think that because when I told my friends at a party that I did have a crush, they got angry and accused me of lying because everyone always has a crush. I had the biggest crush ever. He was a really close friend. And we had an amazing friendship that made me doubt he reciprocated my feelings. After my long-term relationship finished, I just decided to confess my feelings. Because I didn't feel like I could move on if I didn't. We dated for about 6 months. And then separated amicably. We were a better match on paper than IRL. Talking to my crush and being honest about my feelings helped me not idealize them. And eventually I came to terms with the fact that we were not a good couple. My advice is, don't be scared to talk about your crush with your crush. And avoid making them more perfect in your mind. They are still human. Be honest. Be kind. One day I saw her across the quad. I waved and she stopped walking and just stood there. I walked towards her and realized that she wasn't walking towards me. Then I realized she'd never walked towards me. Never sought me out. Never put effort into our friendship. Let alone anything else our relationship might develop into. It took a bit to process. But that was the moment that helped me break free. Him making moves on my 2 best friends. I mean, sometimes I never really got over them. But if I did, it was because I found something out about them that instantly made my interests in them vanish. Or for some other reason. Actually dating him after having a crush for 10 years. It lasted 6 months. Great guy. Terrible boyfriend. I don't have a problem with weed. 1. Finally realizing that he wasn't interested. 2 years later. The passage of time. Also, if I just spend enough time with someone, eventually their annoying stuff helps fade the glimmer from infatuation. My realization of how I was an absolute stalker on his social media. Meeting other people, as opposed to fruiting them. I rationalized that he never really loved me and was simply looking for a friend. Telling her how I feel. Not in a be my girlfriend sense, more in a this thing is bothering me and I need to talk about it way. I was 99.9% sure she only saw me as a friend. Turns out, I was absolutely right. Things got weird between us for about half a week. She is still my best friend, but after confessing, the romantic feelings for her quickly faded away. It feels better this way. Telling them I have a crush on them. It helps seeing them as a real person instead of only seeing the Otter fantasy. Also, the way they react always says a lot about their personality. When you tell them the anxiety of being around them is gone and you can really assess whether you actually like being around them or if the crush was just nerves. Couldn't believe my luck when I found Kim some 25 years later. Still single. And still quite pretty. Took her out to a nice Italian place. And she spent the entire time on her goddamn phone with her stupid friend whose kid wouldn't listen to her. How her deadbeat husband was such a loser. How men in general sucked. I finished dinner. Dessert. Drink. Then another drink. Then paid the bill. When I got up to leave, she still remained on that 90+ minute phone conversation. But held up her index finger. As if asking me to wait just one more minute. Sometimes the real blessing is not getting exactly what you want. When one day my best friend started having hard crushes on her. He didn't know this, but I helped him trying to score her by telling him what moves he should make. Or what's her preference. At that point I realized I was having a crush on her for nearly a decade. And a decade of unrequited love is just too long. The fact that I saw her a few months later in a supermarket after nearly 5 years that I last saw her just broke me. She's just too beautiful and pure for me to have any chances with her. So this time I get to help my best friend and get over my feelings. The ending? Apparently my best friend is just as coward as me and ultimately kept his feelings to himself rather than going through with it. My ex-crush currently has a really cool boyfriend and is on track to finish her architecture degree. Beautiful. Time. Crying. Music. Hobbies. Learning to accept and love myself. Realizing that a crush for years might mean more. And realizing that I have this amazing feeling inside of me. Even if she isn't aware of it, just knowing I can feel it is amazing. Turned out to be a liar and huge scumbag. My feelings didn't change when she was interested in other guys. Until she actively tried to date a married guy. Complete 180 for me on that one in mere seconds. 2-year-long mega crush gone. I was eventually diagnosed with a form of PTSD. And realized that it was making me obsessed with that person. Not the person himself. PTSD, CPTSD in my case, makes you live in the past. Sack up and ask her out. Get rejected and move on. Time and feelings for someone new will ease the crush. Getting to know how cruel she was to animals. Especially stray dogs. The fact that they grow up to be people that I wouldn't get along with. I had crushes on a lot of girls that turned out to be, over time, boring, annoying, or just downright horrible people. It was a slow process. I finally accepted he's straight and would never fall for another guy. And then I found Grindr. Honestly, for me, it was another girl who basically whooped me. Totally distracted me off the one I had years long crush on, and yeah, we started dating for a bit. The crush dissipated and never came back. I loved her, but time, distance, and also I've matured more and grown as a person and realized that my desires are different from what they were. Are you okay? 1. Not seeing them anymore. 2. Finding someone better for you. Some people can really steal your heart by looks alone. But that's no good, cause you might not actually get along that well at all. Neo through a copyright airing but out of sight. Became his friend. Turns out, he is not my type at all. I only liked the idea of him. The mystery of not knowing him was what made him attractive. She died. Helped move on. Kinda feel like an asshole for feeling that. This is implying I did get over that crush. This is going to be the exact opposite answer you're looking for. But I found myself single recently. And ran into him at the grocery store, and after a few minutes catching up. What do you know? He's single too. Asked him out on the spot. He said yes. Turns out that I was his one that got away too. It's been a little while now and we're ridiculously in love and grateful for one another every single day, because we're neither of us the abusive assholes we each spent the last however many years putting up with. Closing. Sometimes the person you had a crush on for years turns out to be the best person you've ever known. Sometimes they don't. But you'll never know unless you try. Attempting to get laid by someone new and as often as possible. The best way to get over someone. I went to look for him after 6 years. He was the worst kisser. It was like he was licking my face. My crush for him died in an hour after almost 10 years. Got into an amazing relationship with the girl I was really supposed to be with all along. Still together 4 years later and it's only gotten better. Wellbutrin, bupropion, actually stops me from getting infatuated and diminishes my affect around my old crushes. I used to crush 1-3 times a year. It's off-label use to treat addiction. Secondly, after reading the book Attached, I realized a good deal of my crushing was activation of my attachment style and had little to do with them. Hard drugs. In high school had a massive crush on this much more popular girl in my year. Eventually her and her friends found out and basically tormented me endlessly about it. That's when I realized she was a duckhead and I no longer cared. You can get mostly over it, but you never get completely over it. Have you tried and been rejected? If you have had a crush for years, but haven't tried? Then maybe you should try physical separation. If you have to see them every day at work or in a close-knit friend group, it's hard to make your mind move on. Do what it takes to avoid them. It helps a lot, but might not fully solve the problem. Let yourself fall for someone else. I think that's the real cure. She got a boyfriend. Made me accept I might as well move on. I asked someone out about 6 months ago and she told me she has a boyfriend. She added on that she wished I asked her sooner and that made it worse. I actually had an opportunity to work with her about a week ago and it was cool, and then somehow it hurt again. Leaving work that day, it was my last day at that job. So. I tried to kill her and spent 13 years in prison. He lied about me to friends that he didn't realize were also friends with my relatives. His lie involved me sleeping with him on the same day I was actually in a wedding with 3 cousins and multiple witnesses. Asshole. Forgot to mention. My first wedding. Yeah. I had already been over the hence the whole getting married thing, but this definitely solidified any lingering feelings I may have had. When they were over for my birthday and ended up kicking my cat, that made me lose my interest pretty damn fast. When I realized she was using me as an emotional crutch and never spoke to me again after graduation. Speaking as a 25-year-old male virgin who's had quite a few crushes in high school, I think it's a combination of growing older and coming to a bit of a realization about how love actually works in the real world. Teenage hormones made me believe I was madly in love with a particular female classmate or acquaintance. And it just suddenly dawned on me that I didn't actually know this girl very well. Never really interacting with her outside of school hours. And obviously enough that my attraction to her was pretty shallow and one-sided in the first place. I was in love with a personal fantasy from my own imaginary world, rather than a real person. It's hard at first realizing I never actually had a chance with her, but it soon became quite easy to get over it and move on. Better than continuing to live in delusion over something that never actually existed in the first place. Time honestly since I had no one to bang due to being the big ugly. Start to think rationally about how that relationship might actually play out. I used to have such a crush on this girl in high school. We were part of a group of friends and she laughed at all my jokes and was pretty. Then after a while in the FZ I started to realize we would be an awful match. She talked non-stop once we were on the phone and I just held it away from my ear and a car full of people could hear her just rambling and rambling, not on speakerphone, and we all looked at each other and kind of laughed about it. I found others. Mocking people in front of others seems like DCK thing to do tbh. The fact that I realized she was kinda a narcissistic CNT. Taking a marijuana edible, which sort of amplified my subconscious thoughts. And I was faced with the alarming extent to which she was living in my head still after so much time had passed. I started doing mindfulness and breathing exercises when I consciously thought of her, and it sort of unraveled the whole thing over a month or two. I still think about her a lot, but in more of a fond recollection way every few weeks rather than a poking an unhealed wound kind of way. Time. The entire point of enduring suffering and to be present for it all is to help others who will go through similar later in your life. Breaking your heart is imperative to accepting love can't be understood. Embrace it. And in the meantime, use your crush as motivation to improve your physical appearance and financial standing. You may lose interest in your crush but will have a healthier body and bigger bank account. Finding a crush. She turned into an anti-mask, anti-vax, QAnon conspiracy theorist. Not having a crush for years. If they don't like you after a few months, move on. You're probably creeping them out. Yes. Thank you. Honestly. If it's not romance after a few months, and an honest declaration of your true intentions, then don't moon around them for years. Pretending to be their friend. Acting like what you're doing is tragically noble. Pretending to be someone's friend while you secretly are just hoping they'll eventually pity you or reward your tenacity with their sex is not noble. It's shitty to misrepresent your intentions. It sucks to find out after years together that he was never ever once your friend. He was just crafting an epic romance in his head and then vanished when he found a girl who wanted to date him. She got pregnant. Looked up BF from 50 years ago on Facebook. Had seen his page before. But in 2020 it was filled with pro-Trump nastiness. And I'm finally over him after all this time. Marrying them. Ouch. Question mark. I think. Question mark. Leaving high school I think. Just realizing hey. They aren't showing any reciprocal affection. So why bother? That is the easiest way to do so.